Even after copping a plea deal, Boosie just got sentenced on a firearm possession charge, and for the first time it feels like there's no coming back from this. But the wild part isn't even the sentence itself, it's Boosie's reaction. According to him, the whole thing is a setup. He's straight up claiming the system is framing him.
The fact that I was sentenced to third offense marijuana, 10 years. I was sentenced to 10 years. The system been let me out.
Some people say this all connects back to when Boosie beat his death row case. Let me break it down when keeping it real goes wrong. The streets are buzzing, the hood is in shock, and hip-hop might have just lost one of its realest soldiers, Torrance. Ivy Hatch Jr., better known to the culture as Boosie Badazz, just took a plea deal that could have him saying goodbye to the game forever.
It's just a plea that I'm doing on August 26th.
But real talk, to understand how we got here, we gotta rewind to where it all began. The rough streets of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. That's where a young Torrance first grabbed the mic and started rapping about the struggle. Boosie's history with the law has been full of run-ins, and that criminal record would later come back to haunt him in ways he never saw coming. The foundation for all this drama was laid back in 2008, when what should have been just another day in the hood turned into the start of a nightmare that still isn't over. On October 22, 2008, Boosie was pulled over by East Baton Rouge deputies. Inside his car, they found weed and a Glock. Now for any street dude, getting caught with a little smoke and a gun is nothing new. But for Boosie, this was his third marijuana charge, and that one detail changed everything. The system was about to railroad him.
Yeah.
Now, how long have you been fighting this thing from the very, very beginning?
I've been fighting for probably 3 years now, probably.
3 years.
Boosie was just starting to blow up in the dirty South hip-hop scene when he got trapped in the same prison system that's been tearing down black men for generations. On September 22, 2009, he pled guilty to his third marijuana charge. What happened? Next was straight-up wild. Judge Chip Moore first sentenced him to 2 years. But when it came out that Boosie had violated his house arrest between the plea and the sentencing, the judge doubled. It's slapping him with 4 years on November 9, 2009.
Now, it was a state case. The feds came, picked it up. They had a ruling in the Supreme Court that went in my favor, and the case got dropped by the judge. The case got dropped.
But the system wasn't done with Boosie yet. While he was already locked up, they decided to stack on even more charges to keep him behind bars for almost a decade. In 2011, still sitting in prison, Boosie got hit with new drug-related charges for trying to smuggle contraband inside. He pled guilty, and that plea stretched his time to 8 years. Just like that, a rising star who was making serious noise in the rap game now faced nearly 10 years in the pen.
The fact that I was sentenced to third offense marijuana, 10 years. I was sentenced to 10 years. The system been let me out.
But the most serious charges were still on the way, setting up one of the most talked about murder cases in Louisiana history. On June 17, 2010, Boosie was indicted for the first-degree murder of Terry Boyd, who had been killed the year before. Prosecutors claimed Boosie hired Michael Marlowe Mike Louding to do the job as part of a murder-for-hire plot tied to street beef. The stakes couldn't have been higher. If convicted, Boosie was facing the death penalty.
I was sentenced to 10 for third offense marijuana. How you know if I'm drug addict if you never send me to rehab? I was sent straight to the pen. How am I, you know if I'm a drug addict if you've never off?
Prosecutors tried to paint Boosie as a cold-blooded killer, even suggesting he was tied to at least 5 other murders, though they never had enough evidence to charge him. The trial turned into a circus. They pulled up his lyric songs like 187 and Body Bag, recorded around the time of Terry Boyd's death, and dissected them, bar for bar, claiming they were basically confessions. On June 28, 2010, Boosie stood in a Louisiana courtroom and pleaded not guilty. His defense team went hard, pointing out that the entire case relied on the shaky testimony of Michael Marlowe Mike Louding. They were so confident the prosecution had nothing solid that they didn't even bother calling witnesses. The tension in that courtroom was heavy as 12 jurors decided whether one of the South's most promising rappers would walk free or face the death penalty. On May 11, 2012, the jury came back after less than 10 minutes of deliberation. The verdict? Not guilty. It was a huge win for Boosie and the hip-hop community, but the damage had already been done. Years of his prime were stolen. Even though he beat the murder rap, he was still locked up on those drug charges. Finally, on March 5, 2014, after serving about 5 years of an 8-year sentence, Boosie was released early, likely due to good behavior and some smart moves by his lawyers. But by then, he was a changed man forever. The wild young rapper who went in came out a hardened veteran, someone who truly understood how the game worked. After His release, Boosie stayed on parole until 2018, meaning he was still under the system's thumb-restricted, monitored, and constantly watched. But instead of letting prison break him, he came out hungrier than ever. He dove straight back into music, dropping project after project and rebuilding his fan base. That comeback became part of his legend. Still, those old convictions were like chains he could never shake. Federal and state laws barred convicted felons from owning firearms, and for Boosie, that meant every gun charge carried even more weight. The same script played out again and again. In 2019, he was arrested in Noonan, Georgia after deputies pulled him over for swerving in a Dodge Charger. The smell of weed led to a search, and once again, police found drugs and a loaded gun. But what happened on May 6, 2023 in San Diego would become the biggest legal nightmare of his life since that murder trial over a decade earlier. What should have been just another routine business trip shooting, a video and performing at a nightclub in the Gaslamp Quarter, turned into a federal case that could take Boosie away from his family for good. That day, as the sun set over San Diego's Choice View neighborhood, the 42-year-old rapper from Baton Rouge was grinding as usual, but the boys in blue were already watching his every move. The irony, the same authenticity that made Boosie a legend was now working against him. He was sharing his real-time experiences on Instagram, live according to court documents. San Diego police, while monitoring a live stream involving a known neighborhood gang member, saw Boosie himself appear in the footage. And what happened next would push the feds to move in, setting the stage for the legal battle he's facing today. On Instagram Live, police claim they spotted a man later identified as Boosie with a black handgun tucked into his waistband, standing in a residential backyard. And real talk, in today's social media era where rappers live stream their lives for the fans, that instinct to keep it authentic backfired. The transparency that made Boosie beloved in the streets gave the feds exactly what they needed to make their move. Authorities didn't hold back. They deployed an airborne law enforcement unit, a police helicopter, to track him to a black SUV. The resources they used were overkill. Multiple units, helicopter surveillance, and coordinated tracking, all focused on a rapper who was just in town to make music and connect with his West Coast fan base. When police finally pulled him over, the results were exactly what they wanted. A search of the vehicle revealed 2 loaded handguns, a Glock, and a Hellcat alongside Boosie and another man, Billy Johnson. Discovery set off a chain reaction that would define the next chapter of his life. At first, the situation seemed manageable. Boosie was facing state charges: possession of a firearm by a felon carrying a concealed weapon in a vehicle, possession of ammunition by a prohibited person, and being an unlisted owner of a registered firearm. His lawyer, Megan Blanco, told him they could work out a plea deal, probation instead of prison. For a moment, it looked like Boosie might beat the odds again.
At first, it was a state case. Your lawyers came in, the state case was dropped.
The strategy made sense from a street perspective. Boosie had learned from past legal battles that sometimes the smartest move is to take responsibility, play ball with the system, and keep it pushing. His fans got it. Was hope this latest legal hiccup would be handled quickly and quietly. But then came the plot twist nobody saw coming. On June 14, 2023, the state charges were dismissed in San Diego County Superior Court. For a brief moment, it looked like Boosie had dodged another bullet. The relief must have been overwhelming. Another close call he had somehow slipped past. That relief lasted about as long as a Newport in a crack house. Moments after walking out of the courtroom, federal agents swarmed and arrested him right outside the courthouse doors. This time, it wasn't the state, it was the feds. The ATF had officially taken over the case, charging Boosie with being a felon in possession of a firearm from that same May 6th incident. The shock hit different his attorneys. Megan Blanco and Damon Alamori called the federal arrest highly unusual, pointing out that Justice Department policy normally prevents doubling up prosecutions for the same offense, but they suggested Boosie's outspoken nature, his raw social media presence, and his criticism of the justice system and his music may have made him a target. This wasn't just about a gun anymore. To his supporters, it looked like the system was out to silence him once and for all.
They went appeal the Supreme Court ruling, and they won on the Supreme Court ruling. Now it was back again.
The emotional toll was written all over his face. Boosie let the world know this wasn't just about charges, it felt like straight harassment. He even went online to apologize to his kids, writing, "I want to take this time to apologize to my kids. I am sorry and I love y'all forever." The thought of doing Fed time while his 9 children watched from the sidelines was clearly breaking him down. Boosie pleaded not guilty to the federal charges, but at first he was locked up. Then, on June 20th, 2023, a magistrate judge granted him bail, first set at $5,000, then raised to $100,000 the conditions. Allowed him to travel for shows, which gave him some financial breathing room. Still, that federal case loomed over him like a storm cloud. For more than a year, Boosie was stuck in legal purgatory, touring, recording, smiling for the cameras, but never knowing when the other shoe would drop. To the public, he looked unstoppable, but behind the scenes, the weight of possibly facing decades in federal prison was eating away at him piece by piece.
Could have appealed that, but that'll be 2-3 more years, and just wasn't gonna go to trial with it,
Then came what looked like divine intervention. On July 12, 2024, U.S. District Judge Kathy Ann Bencho dismissed the federal firearm possession charge, citing a Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decision, United States v. Dwart, that found prohibiting nonviolent felons from owning guns unconstitutional under the Second Amendment. Boo's prior convictions were for nonviolent drug offenses. His legal team successfully argued that he shouldn't be stripped of his gun rights based on this new precedent. Celebration was immediate and emotional. Boosie was crying tears of joy outside the courtroom, saying, "This situation made me see who was down with me and who wasn't. God had a different plan." He even posted a celebration video from the lazy river at San Diego's Suan Casino Resort, looking like he had finally put this chapter behind him once and for all. For Katz, who had followed Boosie's journey through decades of legal battles, this felt like the happy ending his story deserved. Here was a man who had survived the streets, beaten a murder charge, served his time, and was now being vindicated by the highest courts in the land. The redemption story seemed complete, but the federal prosecutors had other plans, and they weren't about to let this slide. The dismissal lasted less than 2 weeks before they came back swinging even harder. On July 19, 2024, U.S. Attorney Tara McGrath's office re-indicted Bowie on 2 counts, one for possession of a firearm by a felon in interstate commerce and a new charge of knowingly possessing a firearm while using or addicted to a controlled substance. The re-indictment was seeking forfeit of all firearms and ammunition involved, and if convicted on both charges, Bowie could face up to 25 years in federal prison.
I was celebrating.
We were celebrating too early.
I was celebrating.
The emotional whiplash was devastating. 1 minute, Bowie was celebrating his freedom and vindication. The next, he was facing even more serious charges than before. His reaction on social media was raw and unfiltered, showing the anger and frustration of someone who felt the system was deliberately trying to destroy him.
I got a call on the beach 3 weeks later with my family. Say they just indicted you again. They added a charge, say I was a drug addict.
I think they were trying to use one of my interviews to justify that over something that you were talking about from like 10 years ago.
The addition of that drug-related charge was straight grimy. Boosie himself questioned why it wasn't part of the original indictment, calling the whole thing a circus, and accusing prosecutors of deliberate overreach. The timing felt cold-blooded, letting him breathe for a second, celebrate his so-called freedom only to snatch it away with even heavier consequences. It was like the system wanted to break him piece by piece. This was the moment Boosie Badazz realized the fight was no longer just about him or his lawyers. It was bigger than street smarts, bigger than sheer determination. The federal government had made it clear they weren't letting this go, no matter what appellate court said, no matter how shaky the case looked. By the summer of 2025, Boosie was a man at war on all fronts, not just against the feds, but against his own pride and the very streets that raised him. For damn near 3 years, he'd been battling a case that only seemed to grow heavier every time. He thought he found a way out. The emotional toll, the financial strain, the weight on his family, it was crushing. And the same man who once swore he'd never fold was beginning to understand something deeper. Sometimes the realest move isn't fighting forever. It's knowing when to walk away from a fight you can't win.